Hello everyone! The beta for patch Luna 4 has recently begun, and Columbina will finally be releasing as a playable character and serves as the Archon unit of Nod-Krai. With this status, there is a much higher expectation for her to be very strong in the meta, and based on her current kit, she is looking to be exactly that, greatly buffing all the lunar-oriented main DPSs while also being surprisingly somewhat versatile as a support for other teams. So let's take a look into her beta kit to see just how powerful Columbina looks, but as always remember that this is very early information before official release, so very subject to change. Columbina is a 5-star Hydro Catalyst who ascends with crit rate. She is the expected Ino upgrade for lunar teams, being an all-field sub-DPS that can actually enable lunar reactions herself, as with her special passive, Columbina alone will allow the team to trigger the 3 available lunar reactions: Lunar Charge, Lunar Bloom, and the new Lunar Crystallize. I won't go over all the details of these reactions in this video, but to summarize, Lunar Charge creates a thundercloud that periodically strikes enemies with Hydro and Electro while also scaling with crit. Lunar Bloom is the same as normal Bloom, but creates verdant dews that characters can use with their kits, and Lunar Crystallize is limited to only Hydro and Geo, but will spawn Moondrift constructs instead of shards that will deal damage after you trigger more Lunar Crystallize reactions. This damage also scales with crit, just like Lunar Charge. Along with enabling these reactions, Columbina will also increase the base reaction damage of all the lunar reactions based on her HP, giving the max 7% buff when she has at least 35,000 HP. And of course, she increases the moon sign level by 1. Columbina's normal attacks aren't that important, but do have one unique aspect. She can consume 1 Verdant Dew to perform a special charge attack which doesn't consume stamina and deals Lunar Bloom damage. While this is unimportant as an off-field support, this does serve as a way for Columbina to play as an on-field main DPS. But one of her main abilities for her primary role as an off-fielder is her elemental skill. Casting it does damage and spawns a gravity ripple that follows the active character. This simply applies and deals AoE Hydro damage, pulsing as a circle around the active character every 2 seconds. This generates particles every other hit, and with Ascended Gleam, the AoE ring gets bigger. But while this gravity ripple is on the field, Columbina will accumulate a resource called gravity when the team triggers lunar reactions. One reaction gives 20 gravity in a 2-second time frame. Once Columbina gains 60 gravity, she will fire an attack called Kuvaki Interference, dealing lunar damage based on the type of lunar reaction that accumulated the most gravity for Columbina. So every 6 seconds, Columbina will deal an additional direct Lunar Charge, Lunar Bloom, or Lunar Crystallize attack, matching whichever reaction was triggered the most in the team she's in. Triggering this off-field lunar damage also increases Columbina's crit rate with her A1 passive. Columbina's burst is the other key element of her kit. It simply deals AoE Hydro damage and summons a lunar domain, working similarly to Nahida's burst. While this lunar domain is active, it will give the entire team lunar reaction damage bonus, and with Columbina's A4 passive, it will also enhance all the available lunar reactions. For Lunar Charge, the thundercloud attack interval will be 0.5 seconds shorter. For Lunar Bloom, the party will be able to obtain 3 special Moon Ridge dews after triggering 3 Lunar Blooms, effectively enabling 3 additional dews for the team to use, with the normal dews having consumption priority. And for Lunar Crystallized, when the Moondrift constructs attack an enemy, there is a 33% chance for them to launch an extra attack. Simply put, for every reaction, the burst will buff the damage coming from it. And that's everything about Columbina's base kit. In terms of constellations, all her constellations will elevate the team's lunar reaction damage by 3%, except C6, which gives 5% instead. As a reminder, elevation is a final direct multiplier to damage, so it is a powerful buff. But more specifically, C1 instantly grants a proc of Kuvaki Interference, her off-field lunar damage that costs gravity and normally happens every 6 seconds after using her skill. And with Ascended Gleam, whenever Kuvaki Interference is triggered, the lunar reaction that accumulated the most gravity for Columbina will be enhanced. If it was Lunar Charge, the active character gains 6 energy. If it was Lunar Bloom, the active character will become uninterruptible for 8 seconds. And if it was Lunar Crystallize, you'll get a Hydro Shield scaling with Columbina's HP. C2 increases the rate of gravity accumulation, pretty much adding 1 Kuvaki Interference proc every rotation. Also, when Kuvaki Interference is triggered, Columbina will gain 30% HP, and the active character will gain a stat buff corresponding to the lunar reaction type that accumulated the most gravity. The buff is Attack, EM, or Defense for Lunar Charge, Lunar Bloom, and Lunar Crystallized, and all of the buffs scale with Columbina's HP. C3 increases her skill talent level by 3, C4 gives energy to Columbina whenever Kuvaki Interference is triggered, and every 15 seconds the damage of one of these procs gets buffed based off Columbina's HP. C5 increases her burst talent level by 3, and lastly, when characters in Columbina's burst domain trigger lunar reactions, Columbina's C6 will give 80% crit damage to the elements evolved in the lunar reaction. So if you trigger Lunar Charge, you'll get 80% crit damage to Hydro and Electro damage, for instance. Overall, Columbina's constellations are mainly supportive and currently look fine, though other support constellations like Setlali C2 are considered stronger, so I wouldn't call her early constellations very game-breaking. In terms of potential builds as an off-fielder, Columbina's signature just gives her a lot of stats. Crit damage, HP, and after triggering a lunar reaction or dealing lunar damage, she gets even more crit damage and HP while also getting 12 energy, helping her ER requirements. Definitely her best in slot in terms of personal damage. For other options, since Columbina's burst is very important to use, energy restoring catalysts are heavily recommended. The two best options other than a signature are Prototype Amber, which is craftable, and Favonius Codex. Prototype Amber gives more HP, heals the team, and gives more energy for Columbina herself, while Favonius Codex gives the team energy and isn't burst reliant, making it potentially better in Stygian Onslaught. For a more damage-oriented 4-star weapon, Sacrificial Jade is solid, just make sure you build enough ER. For on-field main DPS Columbina, all the weapons I just mentioned are still good choices, but in addition, you can add 5-star weapons like Nevilet's or Nefer signatures. For artifact sets, off-field Columbina will have a new accessible set releasing for her patch. The 2-piece of this set gives EM, and the 4-piece gives a total of 60% lunar reaction damage bonus when the holder is off-field and Ascendant Gleam is active. It's solid for increasing her off-field damage, but there are scenarios where Columbina will be slightly better off using 4-piece Silken Moon Serenade to enable the 4-piece team buff. For on-field main DPS Columbina, you would just use 4-piece Night of the Skies Unveiling. For main stats, you want HP or Energy Recharge Hourglass, HP Goblet, and Crit Circlet. Remember that lunar damage doesn't scale with elemental damage bonus, and Columbina needs 35,000 HP to max her team-wide base lunar damage buff for all 3 lunar reactions. Also, make sure to have enough ER. Current estimated ranges are shown here, but it is subject to change. Finally, Columbina's potential best teams. As the premier Lunar Hydro support, her 3 obvious best teams will be with the Lunar-based main DPSs. Flynn's teams are getting a significant buff with Columbina, with Sucrose as still the strongest last slot support, and both Flynn's and Nefa taking advantage of Columbina's buffs. Nefer teams are also getting a significant buff with Columbina, where they can use Nahida, Sucrose, or Kuki as the final support slot. Since Columbina also does off-field Lunar Bloom damage, she will use up the Quill buffs from Llama, but with the extra dues, Llama will hold skill to ensure that there are enough quills to buff both Columbina's and Nefer's Lunar Bloom damage. And Zibai, the Lunar Crystallized DPS releasing in the same patch as Columbina's, will have Columbina as the best in slot Hydro support with the new 4-star Eat Lua and a variable final support, ideally one that gives interruption resistance such as Goro, Zhongli, Xingqiu, and potentially even a Nefa. And if you're one of those people who have Flynn's or Nefer without a Nefer or Llama, just having Columbina on the team is a significant upgrade over their existing Nefa-less or Llama-less teams. However, Columbina isn't just team locked to 3 DPSs. She can pair with other existing Nod-Krai supports to support older DPSs. One of the strongest looking duos currently is the Columbina and Nefa pairing. They enable Lunar Charge, both buff each other by buffing the base damage of Lunar Charge with their passives, and Columbina provides lunar damage percent and reduces the Lunar Charge Thundercloud damage interval with her burst, allowing both of them to just do a lot of damage from off field. With both on the new set, or ideally having Columbina and Silken Moon Serenade, the two are able to basically carry any DPS that can synergize with them. Since it's still early on in the beta, theory crafters haven't had the time to delve into all the potential possibilities, but some teams I've seen include Pyro DPSs like Hu Tao, Arlecchino, and Mawika for a strong overvape team. An Electro DPS like Raiden also does well with the Lunar Charge duo. A Taser team with an Animal Driver like Sucrose to buff the Lunar Charge damage of Columbina and Nefa also looks like a strong team. And in all these cases, early team DPS calcs show that Columbina and Nefa can make any of the teams that they're in do what is currently considered above average to top tier DPS numbers. Columbina similarly pairs with Llama to buff mainly Columbina's off-field Lunar Bloom damage. Llama doesn't do much Lunar Bloom damage herself, and Hydro plus Dendro is a bit less generic than Hydro plus Electro, making this duo less versatile than with the Nefa, but the duo still looks strong in the right teams. For instance, adding in an off-field Electro character like a Nefa funnily enough allows for a strong Hyper Bloom core for a Hydro on-fielder like Nevilet, Ayato, or even on-field Kokomi, and a similar idea may even work with a Dendro on-fielder like Alhaitham. Columbina can also pair with Eat Lua to support and provide off-field damage for a Geo DPS like Ito while enabling Lunar Crystallize for the team. Lastly, there is some potential for Columbina to still work well as the sole moon sign or lunar related support. For example, her alone still enables Lunar Charge for an Electro DPS, and while Nefa would certainly be even better for the team, just enabling Lunar Charge is an improvement over Electro Charge since Lunar Charge scales off the character's crit rate while Electro Charge doesn't. Similarly, Columbina herself still enables Lunar Crystallize for a Geo DPS like Navia. HOYOMiX is changing Navia so she can work with Lunar Crystallize instead of solely regular Crystallize shards. So moving from regular Crystallize, which doesn't deal damage, to Lunar Crystallize, which does deal damage, is already an upgrade, along with Columbina bringing her own off-field damage to the team. And finally, for those those of you who want to on-field main DPS Columbina, you'll want to pair her with Lalma, since Columbina's special charge attack that consumes the Verdant Dew deals Lunar Bloom damage. As an on-fielder, Columbina can play in a Bloom team with Nilou, however, Columbina doesn't have innate interruption resistance, which is an issue. But another option is a Hyper Bloom oriented team, such as with Lalma, Anefa, and Ino, where Anefa's shield solves the interruption resistance issue. And in terms of sheet damage, both types of main DPS teams do look strong. And that's everything on Columbina as of now. There are certainly a lot more possibilities that haven't been looked at in proper detail yet, but even with the handful of teams that have been analyzed so far near the start of her beta cycle, Columbina looks like an incredibly strong Hydro and Lunar support. 43 Lunar main DPSs, Flynn's, Nefer, and Zibai, Columbina is the expected buff for their teams, all of them being quite similar to one another in terms of team DPS. And based on several early calcs I've seen, with more conservative assumptions, Columbina makes Flynn's teams range from 130 to 140k DPS at KQMs. She makes Nefer teams also around that same range, but with shorter rotation times, she can reach upwards to 150k DPS. And then Zibai with Columbina can range from 120k to 140k DPS depending on your Ilua constellations. Considering Flynn's and Nefer were around 100 to 110k DPS before Columbina, and the current best realistic Malwika team that doesn't rely on new combos or RNG cryo application is around 140k DPS, the Lunar DPSs are now reaching and slightly surpassing Malwika level with Columbina. But Columbina can also pair with another Nod-Krai support to support non-lunar DPSs. She can pair with Lalma to create a Hyper Bloom support core for other Hydro on-fielders. She can even use Lalma to empower a Hyper Bloom or Bloom team for herself as the main DPS, which looks promising. And the Columbina and Anefa duo looks incredibly powerful, both doing a lot of off-field damage to carry many main DPSs. On top of that, any Columbina duo will greatly help against enemies that have lunar related mechanics. Columbina definitely loses value if she's the only 5-star Lunar related character you have, but even then she still does have some promise as a solo support, primarily to enable Lunar Charge or Lunar Crystallize for teams, while also providing her own off-field damage and Hydro application. As the Archon unit, the expectation is for her to be meta changing, and she definitely does this and is arguably too powerful. At the high end, she makes the Lunar main DPSs deal similar damage or even surpass Malwika, and on the lower end, she can help increase an older DPS character to team DPS numbers that are currently considered at least above average, raising the current damage floor. With Columbina's current state, she definitely increases the rate of power creep in the game for better and for worse, and because of this, I personally am expecting her to be nerfed in the upcoming weeks of her beta. She is just looking like that strong and meta breaking of a character, but we shall see what actually happens in the upcoming weeks. I hope this quick overview and analysis on Columbina's beta kit was helpful to you all. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, or sub to the channel if you enjoyed, and with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.